Grandpa, Mom and Dad are going to take your money after the party today, my 8-year-old granddaughter whispered. Her words struck me like lightning, tearing through the warm illusion of family love I had held on to for years. I had always trusted them, supported them, stood by them like any devoted grandfather would. But that single sentence from a child, so innocent, so raw, ripped away the mask I didn't know they were wearing. I left the party early, hiding the shock behind a quiet excuse of fatigue. But what came next was not weakness, it was clarity. I set a plan in motion, a clever, ruthless one, to make them face what they truly were. I played their game, and I beat them at it. Now they will never forget. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. Dad, I know what you're thinking, but please just hear me out. Harry's voice came through the phone, slicing the peaceful Saturday morning like a rusted blade. I almost dropped my coffee. Harry never called this early, especially not sounding like that. That anxious, guilty tone was something I hadn't heard since he wrecked my truck as a teenager. Something wrong, son? I leaned back in my kitchen chair, watching the steam rise from my mug as the morning light painted golden patterns across yesterday's unopened newspaper. Well, Mary we both think you should come to Alexa's birthday today. His words tumbled out fast, rehearsed but uneasy. A chill crept into my chest. Since when did they need to persuade me to see my own granddaughter? Harry, have I ever missed Alexa's birthday? No, I didn't mean that. Silence. In the background, I heard Mary's voice. Sharp, firm, almost instructing. It's just that Mary's been planning this all week, Harry continued, his voice tight with forced cheer. She specifically asked me to call you to make sure you'd come. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl into soft whirlpools. Mary specifically asked, Mary, who usually treated my presence as a polite inconvenience. She's really thoughtful. Yeah, she's genuinely excited about this. Harry gave a nervous laugh that grated against my ear. The party starts at 2, but maybe you could come a bit earlier. We wanted to talk, family stuff. My spoon clinked against the mug as I set it down. Family stuff? In 3 years of widowerhood, there had never been a moment that required a special family talk. What kind of family stuff? Oh, just planning for the future. Mary's got a few ideas about how we can stay more connected. I walked to the window, phone to my ear, watching Mrs. Henderson across the street tending to her flower beds. Mary, with her ideas about staying connected. The same woman who spent last Christmas dinner checking her phone every 5 minutes. Sounds lovely, Harry, I said, keeping my voice calm, though my instincts were flaring like sirens. 30 years of boardroom meetings had trained me well. I could always tell when someone was trying to sell me something they didn't believe in. Great, so maybe around 1:30 then? I glanced at the fridge where Alexa's latest drawing hung next to my grocery list. A crooked little house, stick figures labeled Grandpa, and me in purple crayon. She's been the brightest light in my world since Ellen passed. Of course I'd come early. I wouldn't miss Alexa's day for anything. Perfect. And Dad? Harry's voice dropped, softer, more cautious now. Just keep an open mind about what we want to talk about, okay? It's all to make sure everyone is well taken care of. The call ended before I could ask what exactly he meant by everyone is well taken care of. I stared at the phone for a long moment before setting it down beside the untouched newspaper on the kitchen counter. Something felt off. There was a familiar guilt in Harry's tone, one I hadn't heard since he was 8 years old and stole change from Ellen's purse to buy candy. But this felt heavier. Not childhood mischief, something deeper. I poured myself another cup of coffee, trying to brush off the unease. Maybe Mary really did want to strengthen family bonds. Maybe I was overthinking a simple invitation. Still, as I sat back down, cup in hand, I couldn't shake his words. Make sure everyone is well taken care of. In my experience, when people start talking about taking care of everyone, they usually mean taking care of themselves first. I looked at Alexa's drawing again and smiled, despite the knot in my stomach. Whatever Harry and Mary planned to discuss, it could wait until after we celebrated Alexa's 8th birthday. Some things are more important than adult complications. Still, I made a note in my mind to listen carefully, very carefully, to whatever they wanted to say. 20 minutes later, I stood in my bedroom closet, staring at the row of shirts Ellen would never see me wear again. The blue Oxford shirt reminded me of her funeral, of the way Mary whispered about all this space while we laid my wife to rest. Even then, her voice had the faintest edge of calculation. I pulled the shirt from its hanger and looked at myself in the mirror. $70,000. That's how much I've given them over the past 3 years. Mortgage payments, a car loan, Alexa's private school tuition. Ellen would have said it was too much, but she'd have understood. She loved Alexa, and she would have wanted her to have more than what her parents could provide. My wallet felt heavy in my back pocket once I was dressed. 3 maxed out credit cards, all drained for Harry's so-called emergencies. A transmission fix turned into a full engine rebuild. Mary's one-time shopping needs became monthly expectations. Each request came with Harry's awkward apologies and Mary's well-timed thank yous. On my way to grab the car keys, I passed the fridge again. There it was, Alexa's newest drawing, taped beside my grocery list. She'd drawn our last fishing trip, 2 stick figures by a lake in blue crayon, both smiling wide. "Best day ever, Grandpa," written in purple marker across the bottom of the lake. And that's when Mary's recent comment snapped back into my mind. 3 weeks ago, standing in this very kitchen, she looked around and said, "Norman, don't you think this house is a little too big for you? There are some lovely assisted living communities where you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance." Harry quickly changed the subject to Alexa's baseball season, but Mary's eyes lingered. On the granite countertop, on the expensive appliances Ellen and I once chose together, the same look she gave at Ellen's funeral, as if evaluating what might someday be hers. I picked up my car keys from the kitchen counter, and Ellen's final clear words echoed in my mind. "Promise me you'll always take care of Alexa, but watch Harry closely." "He's weak," she had said, "and weak people make dangerous choices when a strong voice whispers in their ear." At the time, I thought she meant Harry's drinking buddies or his get-rich-quick schemes. Now, I wonder if Ellen saw something in Mary I didn't. The way every conversation about money begins with Alexa's needs, the way she makes me feel selfish for even asking where the money goes. The garage door rumbled open as morning light spilled across my Mercedes. Ellen's car sat untouched, pristine beneath its cover. I had kept making payments for months after she died, unable to accept she was truly gone. Maybe that's what they were counting on, that I'd rather pay than disappoint her, that I'd rather trust than question, that I'd rather be a grieving grandfather than a suspicious one. But 40 years in construction taught me one thing. You always check the foundation before building anything that matters. I slowly backed out of the driveway, watching my house shrink in the rearview mirror. By tonight, after whatever talk Harry and Mary had planned, I suspected I would see things differently. But for now, I had a birthday present to buy. Something special for my granddaughter. Perhaps the last gift I'd give her before everything changed. The Northtown Mall buzzed with Saturday morning energy as I parked near the main entrance. It was only 8:15, but families were already streaming into toy stores, just in time for Alexa's surprise. The Lego architecture section pulled me in immediately. Alexa had been fascinated by buildings ever since her class trip to the Space Needle last month. The Statue of Liberty set caught my eye, detailed enough to challenge her growing skills, but not overwhelming. $180 felt like a fair price for something that might capture her curious mind for weeks. "Great choice, sir," the young clerk said as he rang it up. "My daughter loves that one. Would you like it gift wrapped?" "Yes, please. It's for my granddaughter's 8th birthday." Next stop, sporting goods. Alexa had mentioned wanting a real bike, not the tiny pink one she'd long outgrown. The Trek bike in the window looked perfect. Lightweight frame, easy handbrakes, safety reflectors. $320. Not cheap, but worth every penny for the grin I could already picture on her face. As I loaded the box bike into the back of my SUV, I checked my watch, 9:10. Still time for one more stop. "Norman, what a delightful surprise." Dorothy Henderson appeared beside my car, a shopping bag from the bookstore in hand. My neighbor of 15 years looked genuinely happy to see me, her silver hair perfectly set despite the early hour. "Dorothy, good morning. Starting the weekend shopping early, I see. Oh, you know me, Dorothy said with a knowing wink, her voice laced with cheer. There's nothing I enjoy more than diving into the Saturday morning crowd chaos. The noise, the bustle, it reminds me I'm still alive. She tilted her head slightly and gestured toward the main entrance of the mall, where families trickled in, tugging toddlers and juggling shopping bags. But something tells me you're not here for the thrill of weekend retail. She leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to feel like gossip. You're getting things ready for the big celebration, aren't you? Harry mentioned Alexa's birthday when I bumped into him last week. He seemed genuinely thrilled. I closed the SUV's rear hatch with a soft, deliberate thud that sounded final somehow. You saw Harry? I asked, trying to sound casual. Downtown, she said with a light shrug as though it were no big deal. Tuesday morning, I think. They were just coming out of First National Bank. Big stack of papers in Harry's hand. Looked important. Mary was with him too. Her tone dipped into a conspiratorial whisper. Could be they're refinancing something. Young couples these days, always signing something, always making moves, makes my head spin. Tuesday, that was 4 days ago, and not a single mention of any bank visit during this morning's clipped, careful conversation with Harry. But maybe that wasn't unusual. People keep their financial dealings private all the time, even with family, especially with family. Still, the timing. Probably just routine paperwork, I said, shifting the weight of the shopping bag in my hand to the other arm, offering a smile I wasn't entirely sure reached my eyes. Dorothy gave my arm a gentle, well-meaning pat. Oh, I'm sure you're right, dear. And anyway, it's none of my business. You know me, just a curious old lady. She chuckled, the sound light but warm. Now go spoil that sweet granddaughter of yours. Give her a hug from me, will you? With that, she turned and bustled away toward the bookstore, her scarf flapping lightly behind her like a banner of pleasant nosiness. I stood alone beside the car, her words echoing in my mind, not loud, but persistent. Bank documents on Tuesday, a tense, evasive phone call on Saturday. Something about it aligned too neatly, like puzzle pieces falling into place when you weren't even trying to solve anything. Then again, Harry had always carried the air of a man tangled in one quiet financial mess or another, perpetually balancing on the edge of solvency without ever quite falling off. I shook it off. No use borrowing trouble. Turning toward the east entrance of the mall, I made my way to the florist, determined to focus on the day at hand. Mary always had a soft spot for flowers, and white roses, I thought, would be an elegant gesture. Thoughtful, appropriate for Alexa's birthday hostess. The florist greeted me with a tired smile. She looked like she hadn't left the soil in days. Her nails dark, her apron dusted with pollen and leaf bits. Still, her hands moved with quiet purpose as she wrapped a dozen long-stemmed white roses in shimmery foil, tucking the ribbon just so. Lovely choice, she murmured, examining the bouquet. Is it a special occasion? I nodded slowly, watching the petals. Yes, I said softly. Very special. My granddaughter's birthday party, I said, offering the florist a small smile as I adjusted the bouquet in my hands. These are for her mom. The woman paused, tying off the last bit of ribbon with a flourish. Very thoughtful, she said warmly. I'm sure she'll love them. $28 for flowers that would begin to wilt in a matter of days. A fleeting gesture, some might say. But I'd come to learn that in family dynamics, especially ones as delicate as mine, small gestures were not meaningless. They were currency. They bought peace, softened moods, bought time. And in this moment, I hoped they'd buy grace. By 9:30 a.m., the back of my SUV looked like a department store display. Nearly $600 in birthday gifts, each one chosen with Alexa in mind. The massive Lego creator set she'd been eyeing for months. The bright pink bicycle with the glittering streamers on the handlebars. A carefully penned birthday card, tucked into the white envelope. And of course, the white roses, elegant, understated, and just sentimental enough for Mary to appreciate. That's what grandfathers did. They indulged their grandchildren. They celebrated the small things. They showed up, even when things were complicated. The highway was already congested with the usual Saturday morning bustle. As I maneuvered through the traffic, my mind drifted. Not to the party or the gifts or even Alexa's bright smile, but to Dorothy's passing comment, Harry and Mary at the bank on Tuesday, with documents, looking official, looking serious. That morning's phone call replayed in my head like an off-key song. Harry's guarded tone, the way he avoided small talk, his clipped responses, and not one mention of the bank. But perhaps it was nothing. Married couples did things like that all the time. Refinance a mortgage, update a will, set up college savings plans. They didn't owe anyone an explanation. Still, something about the timing, the secrecy, left a splinter in the back of my thoughts. I pulled into the driveway, heart heavy with questions I had no right to ask. Inside the house, wrapping paper crinkled and the tape curled at my fingers as I carefully wrapped Alexa's gifts. Then came a quick sandwich in the kitchen, a sip of lukewarm coffee, and by precisely 2 p.m., I was at Harry's front door. Before I could press the bell, the door flew open. "Norman!" Mary stood there like she'd been waiting for a surprise guest. Arms outstretched, voice lilting with delight, smile wide enough to suggest we hadn't spoken in months, not just 7 days. "You look wonderful today." I blinked. Her warmth was jarring. Mary was not the effusive type. Normally, she offered a polite hug and disappeared to arrange napkins or check the oven timer. Today, she stood in the doorway like a game show hostess. It was odd. Something in her eyes sparkled too brightly. Something in her tone rang too clear. Overcompensation. That was the word that came to mind, and I suddenly wondered, were the flowers in my hands going to be enough? Or far too late? Today, Mary touched my arm twice while she spoke. An unusually affectionate gesture from someone who normally kept conversations efficient and brief. Her eyes sparkled with an energy that felt almost manufactured, like she was performing a role, not living in it. "Thank you, Mary. The party looks wonderful." I stepped inside, carrying the oversized bike box wrapped in bright silver paper and the striped gift bag that held the Statue of Liberty Lego set. The hallway looked like a party planner's catalog had exploded. Ribbons draped from every doorway, clusters of helium balloons anchoring the corners, and a meticulously set dessert table gleaming under soft lights. Far more elaborate than any birthday Alexa had ever had. Too elaborate, it's suspiciously elaborate. Before I could process it further, a voice boomed from the living room. "Bushke, there you are." Harry strode out like he was working a trade show, voice loud, arms open wide. "Come meet Mike from work. Mike, this is the amazing father I've told you so much about." Amazing father, strange choice of words, considering Harry's usual critiques. When he talked about me at work, it was usually to illustrate my resistance to modern marketing strategies, or how I was still clinging to the fax machine. Now here he was, slapping my shoulder with such force I nearly dropped the Lego bag, grinning with theatrical warmth, his laughter filling the hallway like piped-in carnival music. Too much. Everything today was just too much. The living room buzzed with familiar faces. The Johnsons from next door were by the fireplace, drinks in hand. Mrs. Smith sat stiffly on the floral couch, scanning the crowd like she was grading a social event. Carlos and Elena Martinez were crouched by the coffee table, helping their son Tommy tape down party game cards. Then a sudden warmth. "Grandpa!" Alexa came running, hair flying, cheeks flushed. Her smile, pure and unaffected, cut straight through the falseness around us. She crashed into my waist with a tight hug, and for a flicker of a second, everything felt normal again. Real. Safe. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I handed her the gift bag first, keeping the bigger surprise for later. She opened it slowly, reverently, her fingers careful as if unwrapping a sacred artifact. Her eyes widened at the box, the Lego Statue of Liberty, and she gasped, the kind of gasp that reminds you why birthdays matter. She looked up to thank me, but something passed across her expression, a shadow quick and quiet, and then Mary swooped in. "Grandpa is so generous, isn't he, sweetheart? Say thank you properly now." Alexa turned, schooling her face. "Thank you, Grandpa. This is wonderful." Her voice was warm, sincere, but underneath it was something else, a flicker of worry, maybe even guilt. 8 years old, far too young to be navigating adult tensions. Harry ushered me into the kitchen like a man on a schedule. There, Mike Davidson, a tall man with a car dealership logo on his polo, was sipping a beer and chatting about lease options and Q4 sales bonuses. Ordinary conversation, harmless on the surface, but Harry kept cutting in, piling on praise like he was reading from a script. Dad built his company from nothing. He's the reason I know anything about management. Dad always had an eye for real estate. 3 properties, all paid off. Can you believe that? The tone was forced, the rhythm unnatural, as if he wasn't trying to introduce me to a colleague, but convince him of a narrative. Or convince me. Mike nodded politely, offering the occasional laugh, but his eyes darted between us, perhaps sensing the same tension I felt. Harry's smile stretched too wide. Mary's energy was too polished. Even the decorations, for all their beauty, felt like part of the performance. And I couldn't help but wonder, was this really a birthday party? Or damage control dressed in ribbons and cake? Norman knows everything about building successful relationships, Harry declared to Mike, his voice a little too bright, a little too rehearsed. He taught me a lot about trust and loyalty to family. Trust and loyalty to family. Words that sounded wholesome in theory, heartwarming even, but felt jarring in this moment, like someone quoting scripture at a poker table. They hung in the air, oddly heavy for what was supposed to be small talk at a child's birthday party. Mike shifted uncomfortably. His smile faltered just a touch. He nodded out of politeness, not conviction. It was clear he didn't know what to do with Harry's sudden sermon on familial virtue. Then Mary reappeared, a vision of curated hospitality, carrying a silver tray of appetizers like a flight attendant on her best day. She stepped between me and a group of chatting neighbors, her presence sudden and deliberate. "Norman, you absolutely must try this canapé." Her voice was syrupy sweet, her eyes too bright. "I made them especially with your refined palate in mind." My refined palate? That was news to me. Mary had never asked me about food beyond confirming I wasn't allergic to anything at Thanksgiving. She'd never once commented on my taste in wine or noticed when I brought an artisanal cheese plate to Christmas. Now she hovered like a Michelin-starred hostess, topping off my glass before it was even half empty, asking every few minutes if the temperature was all right, if the chair was too firm, if I'd like a different napkin. It wasn't just attentiveness. It was overcompensation. Across the room, I spotted Alexa sitting cross-legged on the floor, opening a stack of cards from classmates. Her posture was poised, her smile polite, but something about it felt too practiced, too polished. When Tommy Martinez asked her about the new Lego set, she responded with a nod and a quiet thank you. She smiled. She was sweet, but she wasn't lit up. Not the way I knew she could be. Not the way she'd be if this party felt as magical as it looked. Someone at Marabaying was dimming her joy. "She's growing up so fast," a voice beside me but murmured. I turned to see Mrs. Smith lowering herself carefully onto the sofa. Such a thoughtful child. Just last week, she asked me if grandparents and parents ever disagreed on important decisions. My wine stopped midair. "What did you say to her?" I asked. She took a slow sip from her tea, eyes fixed on Alexa. "I told her families always work out their differences, with love and honesty." She looked at me then, really looked. Her gaze softened with concern, a knowing kind of sadness, as if she'd seen something in Alexa that worried her, something that didn't belong on an 8-year-old's face. Across the room, Harry and Mary exchanged a look, not a glance of shared joy or casual connection. It was coordinated, practiced, a silent check-in between two people playing the same role on the same stage. And I realized something chilling. They weren't hosting a party. They were staging a performance. And I was the most important audience member. I realized they had been doing it all afternoon. Fleeting glances across the room, subtle nods, carefully timed interjections whenever a conversation edged too close to something personal or uncomfortable. Every movement choreographed, every smile deliberate. It was as if Harry and Mary had memorized a script, and I was the one they needed to convince. The laughter was just a bit too loud, The compliments flowed too easily, like lines practiced in the mirror. Even the decorations, the streamers, the carefully matched balloons, felt like props in a show they were determined to sell as authentic. Only one thing remained genuine: Alexa. Her hugs were real, her thank yous heartfelt, but even she seemed to be carrying something, an invisible weight that dulled her natural sparkle. Her joy was present but strained. She was celebrating but guarded, as though she were watching the adults for cues she didn't fully understand yet. As the party wound down and the last of the guests began collecting purses and plastic goodie bags, Harry caught my eye with a gesture that tried too hard to look casual. "Dad, could you stay after everyone leaves?" His tone was breezy, his smile thin and stretched. Mary and I have been looking forward to that little family talk we mentioned. There it was, that phrase again. Little family talk. The way people might describe a trip to the dentist. The cheer in the room suddenly felt oppressive, like the charged stillness before a summer storm. Artificial light, forced warmth, manufactured joy. I smiled back, polite but wary. "Sure, just need to wash up first." I gestured toward the hallway. Mary stood before I could even move. "Oh, let me show you," she chirped too quickly. Her concern felt polished, like the finishing touch on a sales pitch. She pointed toward the bathroom as if I hadn't been to this house 100 times. As I stepped away from the noise of the party, my mind swam. The kitchen, the living room, the dining area, it had all been performance. Not a party, but a presentation. Then just as I turned the corner by the hallway mirror, I felt it, a quiet gaze following me. I looked back and saw Alexa, standing by the gift table, clutching a book someone had given her. Her eyes found mine, and I saw something there that stopped me mid-step. Worry in a child's eyes on her birthday. Then I heard it, tiny footsteps, soft and hesitant. "Grandpa," she whispered, barely louder than the rustling balloons behind her. I turned fully. She was glancing toward the living room, making sure we were alone. Then she stepped closer, her voice fragile and brave all at once. The birthday girl, dressed in ruffles and glitter, looked like she was carrying the world. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked, kneeling so we were eye to eye. Her small hand gripped the edge of her dress. Her lips quivered, but her gaze was steady, serious, just like her grandmother's had been. "You look worried about," I said gently. She bit her lower lip. The gesture hit me like a ghost. It was Ellen's lip bite, the one she used when she was about to say something hard. I waited, because when a child wants to speak truth, the worst thing you can do is rush them. Her little voice trembled. They want to ask you something big." I didn't speak, just nodded once, letting her know I was listening. "But I think they're not telling you everything." And in that moment, I knew. The party hadn't been a celebration, it had been a campaign. And the one person brave enough to tell me the truth was an 8-year-old child with Ellen's courage in her heart. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something important about Mom and Dad." Her voice was barely more than a breath, quivering with fear and the weight of something far too heavy for such small shoulders. I felt my chest tighten instantly, my entire body snapping to attention like it used to in high-stakes business meetings. But this was different. This was my granddaughter. "What about them, sweetheart?" I asked gently, though a deep dread was already spreading through my ribs like ice. She glanced back toward the party, then stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "They're going to take your money tonight." The words came out fast, almost rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for this moment and feared she might lose her nerve. I instinctively reached for the doorframe behind me to steady myself. The hallway seemed to tilt slightly, the air turning thin. "What did you hear?" I asked, keeping my voice calm for her sake, even as my stomach twisted. Her brow furrowed, eyes brimming with scared determination. "Mom said he has too much money for an old man living alone. Then she told Dad, we'll take care of it tonight." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced. Bank papers. Dorothy Henderson's cheerful voice returned to me like a ghost. I saw them coming out of First National Bank. The documents, the smiles, the overly generous compliments. It had all been a setup. And Alexa, sweet, observant Alexa, had seen through it all. I crouched lower, searching her face for any sign of exaggeration, but all I saw was pure, trembling truth. Did they say anything else? I asked gently, unwilling to plant ideas but needing to know the full extent. She nodded, biting her lower lip again, Ellen's mannerism echoing in her small frame. Dad said, "What if he finds out?" And Mom said, "It'll be too late by then." A silence bloomed between us, thick and sharp. Tears welled up in her eyes and her tiny voice cracked. "I don't want them to take your money, Grandpa. You're the only one who really listens to me." Something inside me broke open. Not just at the thought of betrayal from my own son, but at the quiet agony in this child who should have been blowing out candles, not shielding me from deceit. I pulled her into my arms and held her tightly, feeling her body shake. So small, so brave. Ellen's granddaughter, my granddaughter, carrying secrets no child should ever know. I closed my eyes and breathed in her hair, fighting back the fury rising in my chest. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust, about the quiet, invisible damage betrayal does to a family when it hides behind cake and balloons. "You did the right thing telling me," I whispered, my voice steady for her sake. "You were very brave, but we have to keep this just between us for now. Can you do that?" She nodded, her cheek pressed against my shoulder. "Are you going to stop them?" I leaned back just enough for her to see my face. My eyes locked on hers. "Yes, sweetheart, I promise. I will take care of everything." A flicker of relief passed through her, but the storm hadn't cleared yet. "Now," I said softly, smoothing her hair, "we need to go back out there like nothing happened. Can you be brave just a little longer?" She nodded again, quieter this time. "I think so." And in that moment I knew. The fight wasn't just for my finances, it was for her. For the child who still believed someone would protect her. She wiped her nose with the back of her small hand. "Will Mom and Dad still love me if they get mad?" The question shattered me more than any of their betrayal had. It struck like a blade, not because it questioned love, but because it came from a child already bracing for punishment she didn't deserve. Her voice, so fragile and unsure, held a fear far too complex for someone celebrating her 8th birthday. "Alexa," I said softly, bending to meet her eyes again, my own throat tight. "No matter what your parents say or do, nothing, absolutely nothing, can ever change how much they love you. Nothing at all. Do you understand me?" She blinked, eyes filling again, but this time not with fear, with hope. That radiant flicker of belief burst into a smile, the first genuine one I had seen from her all afternoon. "I love them too, Grandpa." Those words almost brought me to my knees. This little girl, caught between loyalty and truth, still held enough grace in her heart to love them. Hand in hand, we walked back toward the sound of distant music and laughter. But the party no longer felt like a celebration. In just a few whispered moments, the shape of my world had changed. The son I had raised, the woman I once welcomed like a daughter, the family I had built from scratch, brick by brick, now seen not as my legacy, but as potential predators. As we stepped back into the warmth of streamers and cake, I caught Harry's eye across the room. He smiled broadly, waving as if everything were perfectly normal. The charm that had unsettled me earlier now rang hollow. It was performance, nothing more. Rejoining the party felt like walking onto a stage. Everyone knew their lines. Everyone pretended not to notice the script had changed. I drifted seamlessly into the chatter, the compliments, the expected cheer. Decades of business had taught me how to wear masks like second skin, but now I wore mine for survival, not for profit. While Mrs. Smith described her rose bushes in loving detail, I observed, I counted, I remembered. Harry checked his watch. Again, 3rd time in 10 minutes. Mary reappeared at his side almost instantly. Their movements were coordinated, timed to seem casual, but I saw it clearly now. It was choreography, it was strategy. They weren't attending a party, they were managing a mark. And that mark was me. "Norman, would you like more wine?" Mary appeared with the same flawless timing, touching my arm lightly as if the gesture were second nature. "You look a little pale. Are you feeling all right?" Pale I might have been, discovering that the people you trusted most might be plotting to strip away everything you'd built. Yes, that could drain the color from anyone's face. Still, I smiled, not convincingly cheerful, just enough to blend. Just a bit tired, I'm all right. I caught the flicker in her expression. Barely there, a small sigh, not of concern, but of relief. She thought I was tired, weakened, vulnerable, and that suited her plans just fine. But I wasn't vulnerable. Not anymore. Now I knew. For the next hour, I played the role they expected. The polite, aging patriarch. Smiling, listening, falling right into place. All the while, behind every nod, I planned. And when the last guest left, I would be ready. The kind-hearted grandfather. The generous father of the family. An aging man, perhaps a little slower, a little softer around the edges. That was the character they had written for me, and I played it beautifully. I smiled graciously when they offered their concern, thanked them for their hospitality, and kept my face serene as I watched the gears turning behind every polite exchange. But inside, I wasn't just listening. I was studying. Every glance, every deflection, every unspoken agreement between them. They had become a perfect duet. Harry, careful not to mention money. Mary, expertly diverting every conversation that came too close to that forbidden topic. Retirement, wills, inheritances. Anytime a guest drifted towards something sensitive, she would steer the topic to safer ground. My blood pressure, upcoming holidays. How incredible it was that I still lived independently. They were framing the narrative, laying the groundwork for whatever came next. By 5:30, long shadows stretched across the front yard. Guests started saying their goodbyes, gathering coats and thank you gifts. I decided it was time to take control of the scene. I think I should leave early, I said, resting one hand on my temple. This headache won't go away. It worked instantly. The carefully constructed rhythm faltered. Harry and Mary shared a look, and for the first time all day, it wasn't confident or calculating. It was alarm. Dad, wait, Harry said quickly, stepping between me and the front door like a bouncer at a club. We really need to talk about those family matters we mentioned. Remember? You promised to stay after everyone left. I smiled faintly, letting my posture slump just enough to sell the act. Maybe another time, I replied. I really need to rest. Mary's tone shifted. The warmth vanished, replaced by thinly veiled desperation. But Norman, she said, voice tight with urgency, we had something special planned for tonight. Something we've been preparing for weeks. There it was. The plan unraveling in real time. Dorothy Henderson's comment about seeing them at the bank. The documents. The timing. Everything hinged on me staying. On me signing. And now I was slipping away, just beyond their grasp. It can certainly wait until tomorrow, I said, calm but firm. The family isn't going anywhere. That's when Harry cracked. His tone sharpened. His mask dropped just a little. Actually, Dad, there are urgent financial matters we need to discuss. They really can't be delayed. Urgent financial matters. So polished. So precise. I filed the phrase away. Another piece of evidence in the quiet little war they thought I hadn't noticed. Tomorrow, son, I said softly. I promise. And then I turned to the one person I still trusted without reservation, Alexa. She stood quietly near the corner of the room, her eyes filled with concern far too heavy for an 8-year-old. I knelt down and opened my arms. She ran into them without hesitation, and I held her close, possibly for the last time before this storm changed everything. Thank you for the best birthday party ever, sweetheart. Thank you for being here, Grandpa. Her voice was a whisper into my collar. Her arms clung like vines around my neck. I love you so much. I love you too, I whispered back, low and certain. More than you'll ever know, and everything is going to be okay. As I stood, Harry moved behind me. I felt his hand land on my shoulder, firm, too firm, almost restraining. Dad, please, he said, his voice intense. Just 1 hour. 1 hour to go over some important family decisions. I looked into his eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. because the man standing before me wasn't my son anymore. He was someone else, a man hollowed by desperation, seduced by greed. Whatever pieces of love had once tied us together, they were now frayed, fading fast. But I kept my voice steady, measured, kind. "Another time, Harry," I said with finality. "I really need to get home." I walked to my car while they stood watching from the doorway, Mary whispering urgently into Harry's ear, both of them radiating frustration and tension. I felt the weight of the performance finally lift from my shoulders. Alone in the Mercedes, I sat for a moment at the end of their driveway, reflecting on the magnitude of what had just occurred. My own family had planned to rob me tonight, armed with legal documents and careful preparation. Starting the engine, I pulled away from the house where we had just celebrated what might be the last normal family gathering. Inside, the silence was no longer peaceful. It was filled with intent. I drove straight to my home office, the room where I had built my construction empire from one truck and sheer willpower. 40 years of vital documents sat behind the wall, secure behind Ellen's portrait as I turned the dial on the hidden safe. Muscle memory from decades of deals guided my fingers. January 18th, 1959, Ellen's birthday. How fitting, I thought, that her memory would now help protect everything we had built together. The documents told a story I had trusted too blindly to read properly before. Bank statements showed financial requests growing from hundreds to thousands over 3 years. The investment portfolio was worth far more than Harry or Mary realized. Property deeds for rental units they didn't know existed. And most importantly, a record of every payment I had made to support them, 247 personal transactions. I cataloged everything with the same methodical precision that had built my business. Mortgage supplements, car repairs, medical bills, private school tuition for Alexa. Every transaction had once been explained as a family emergency or opportunity I had believed in at the time. Sitting at my desk, looking at Ellen's photo on the bookshelf, I finally saw the fraud for what it was. The escalating requests had conditioned me to agree to larger and larger sums. Mary's recent suggestions about assisted living weren't concern for my health. They were tests, probes for tonight's attempted theft. Every mortgage check, every tuition payment, I said aloud to Ellen's picture. They've been planning this for months. My phone sat quiet on the desk. Harry and Mary were likely scrambling, wondering how to proceed without me at their important family discussion. The thought gave me a sense of satisfaction. I opened my Rolodex and found the personal number for James Miller, a man I'd trusted for over 20 years, vice president of First National Bank. James would remember the meticulous contractor, never late on a payment, never breaking his word. More importantly, he would understand the true significance of legal documents obtained through deceit. The clock read 9:30 p.m., too late for business calls, but I made a note to contact him first thing in the morning. Priority 1, understand exactly what documents Harry and Mary had acquired and how to legally dismantle them. Next, I reviewed my will and trust documents, standard agreements leaving everything to Harry, with provisions for Alexa's education and future, written back when I still believed my son possessed integrity and familial love, not just greed. Those documents would need to be rewritten immediately. Catherine Davis had notarized most of my legal papers over the years, independent, discreet, and unaffiliated with any bank Harry or Mary might be aligned with. Another call for tomorrow morning. Spreading my investment reports across the desk like battle plans, I calculated my net worth for the first time in years. $2.3 million in liquid assets, plus 3 rental properties, plus this house, fully paid for. Far more than Harry and Mary estimated, and certainly more than they could have stolen in one evening of legal trickery. But this wasn't about money, this was about justice. For an 8-year-old girl whose parents were willing to hurt her with adult secrets. This was about consequences. For those who had exploited an old man's love for his family, betrayal must carry a cost. Ellen's voice echoed from our final conversation. Watch Harry carefully. Weak men make dangerous choices when strong voices whisper in their ears. Now I understood. Mary had been whispering for 3 years, and Harry had chosen greed over loyalty every time. My phone rang suddenly, jolting me from the plan. Harry's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. By Sunday morning, everything was clearer. After a sleepless night finally gave way to rest. When I awoke just before dawn, my business instincts had returned in full. I was focused, calm, and I had a plan. While sipping my coffee in the office, I flipped open my business contacts to James Miller's personal number. 9 a.m. seemed like a reasonable hour to call an old friend about financial matters. Our friendship spanned 20 years of borrowing, investing, and the steady success of valuation. He would trust a call from me, especially one about managing an investment portfolio. "James, sorry to bother you on a Sunday morning," I began as he picked up. "I'm reviewing my portfolio and wanted your thoughts on some consolidation ideas." "Norman, always a pleasure to hear from you," he replied warmly. "What are you thinking?" "I'm considering simplifying the accounts, maybe streamlining everything for easier oversight." "What's the bank's current stance on financial support programs?" "There are a few options depending on your needs. Are you thinking of automated services or something more hands-on?" A perfect opening. "Actually, I'm wondering about power of attorney agreements and guardianship options." "Seen any clients deal with those recently?" James paused. I could almost hear him weigh the confidentiality lines. "Funny you ask. Just last week, I had a few people inquire about guardianship procedures for an elderly family member." My coffee cup halted halfway to my lips. "Oh, a complicated process, I imagine." Actually, they seemed pretty prepared. Did a lot of research on guardianship requirements, filing timelines. Very thorough, extremely thorough. My son and daughter-in-law had studied exactly how to legally strip me of my independence. How considerate of them to help the family. They asked specific questions about mental competency evaluations, financial oversight documentation, court approval timelines. James's expertise was exactly what I needed now. "They understood the legal terminology better than most lawyers I've worked with," he said. "They were planning to have me declared legally incompetent, to seize everything I'd built over 4 decades. The scope of their betrayal stretched wider than I'd ever imagined." "Did they seem confident about their position?" I asked carefully. "Absolutely. Said they had paperwork ready, doctor's notes lined up, and hoped the process would move quickly once initiated." James chuckled. "Most families aren't nearly that organized when it comes to transitioning elder care." That phrase, transitioning elder care, made me grip the phone tighter. They had studied how to put me in a nursing home while stripping me of my assets, and they'd done it professionally and systematically. "Sounds like they really care about the family's well-being," James remarked. I had to admire the irony. What impressed me most was just how thoroughly they'd prepared everything to move quickly and legally. They'd asked about emergency procedures, urgent guardianship filings, rapid response in cases where someone's incompetence posed a risk to their own finances. Hearing my own situation described in such clinical banking terms was surreal. "I really appreciate this, James," I said. "It helps me understand what options are on the table." "Anytime, Norman. Honestly, you sound sharper than men half your age. I can't imagine you needing that kind of support for decades." If only he knew how close I'd come to needing it just yesterday. "Let's hope you're right," I said. "Thanks for taking my call on a Sunday." "Always happy to," he replied. "Let me know if you want to schedule a formal review of your portfolio." After hanging up, I stared down at my notes. Mental competency evaluations, paperwork, medical opinions, emergency filings. Harry and Mary weren't just trying to rob me. They had built an entire legal framework to justify stealing my life. The phone rang again, dragging me out of my thoughts. Harry's name flashed on the screen. This time I answered. "Hello?" I answered with a deliberate weariness, as though reaching across the desk had cost me great effort. "Dad, thank God," Harry's voice came through, full of what sounded like genuine relief. "I was worried sick when you left yesterday." His voice trembled with concern, but now I could hear the calculation beneath it. "Are you okay?" "Oh, Harry." I let my voice trail off, as if concentrating on thought itself had become difficult. "I've had such a terrible headache lately." "Hard to focus on anything lately," I murmured. "That doesn't sound good. Maybe we should get you to see a doctor," Harry offered. "Mary and I can drive you to the clinic this afternoon." Perfect. They were speeding up the timeline, just as I'd hoped, now that the original plan had unraveled. So thoughtful of them. I've just been so confused these days, I added quietly. Don't worry, Dad. We'll take care of everything, Harry assured me. We'll be there in about an hour. All right, after hanging up, I spent 30 minutes preparing for the most important performance of my life. I combed my hair, put on an old sweater that made me look frailer, and rehearsed slower, shakier movements befitting someone truly elderly. When their car pulled into my driveway, I was ready. Norman, we brought some paperwork that might help with your situation, Mary announced once they were settled in the living room. She carried a sleek leather briefcase, the kind attorneys use for serious documents. Paperwork? I blinked at her with what I hoped was genuine confusion. What kind of paperwork? Harry leaned in, his tone serious. Dad, we've looked into some ways to help you manage everything better. Finances, medical decisions, that sort of thing. Manage? I echoed, feigning uncertainty. I rubbed my temples as if the conversation itself was physically painful. Everything's just felt so complicated lately. Mary opened the folder like a seasoned professional. These documents will give us power of attorney, just a backup system, so we can help with your banking, bills, doctor's appointments. The forms looked very official, with highlighted signature sections. Someone had spent real money on legal prep for this theft. I stared at the papers as though they were written in hieroglyphics. It's all just too much, I mumbled. I used to understand this stuff so well. Exactly why we need to do this now, Mary pressed, before things get harder for you. Harry shifted uneasily. Dad, are you sure you're okay? You seem different today. I looked at him with a mix of gratitude and subtle disorientation. Different? I don't feel any different. Just tired, always tired. These headaches make it hard to think straight. Mary and Harry exchanged a glance, that same unspoken signal I'd seen at the party. Only now I finally understood what it meant. They were assessing whether I could sign documents without truly understanding them. Norman, these papers will help us help you more easily, Mary continued. You won't have to worry about managing everything by yourself anymore. I suppose that would be good, I said slowly, my hand trembling as I held one of the pages. But this is a big decision. My head is pounding. It's hard to think clearly. Of course it's a big decision, Harry chimed in quickly. Take your time. But Mary's patience seemed thinner. Don't you think it would be easier if your family could help you? You trust us, don't you? Of course, I answered. I trust you. Your family. I gently set the papers down. But could I maybe sleep on it? Decide tomorrow when my head's clearer? These headaches just make everything so foggy. Harry and Mary exchanged another glance, and I saw Mary's frustration barely concealed beneath her caring tone. Yes, Dad, we'll come by in the morning, and you can sign them then. After they left, I sank into the chair. For the first time in hours, I stopped performing. The documents they'd left behind told the whole story. Power of attorney forms, giving them control over my finances, medical decisions, and living arrangements. Everything James had warned me about, wrapped in legal language designed to steal the rest of my life. 3 hours later, I was at my home office desk reviewing notes from Harry and Mary's visit like a general planning a campaign. Their power of attorney papers lay scattered across the desk. Sleek, professional forms granting them full control over every part of my life. Each signature line highlighted in yellow, each witness requirement carefully noted. They'd done their homework, but they forgot. I've spent 40 years doing mine. Catherine Davis picked up on the second ring. Norman, good evening. How can I help you? Catherine, I need notary services for some family financial paperwork. Tomorrow morning. Could you come by my house around 10? Of course. What kind of paperwork are we handling? I've chosen my words carefully. Power of attorney forms. It's a bit of a sensitive family matter, so I hope you'll be especially mindful. You know you can count on that. I'll bring my stamp and ledger. Perfect. Catherine had notarized dozens of contracts for my construction firm over the years. She could spot coercion or undue pressure instantly. It was part of her professional training. Next call, James Miller. James, could you stop by around 10 tomorrow morning? I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I'd like to go over my portfolio in more detail. Absolutely, Norman. After what we discussed about support with financial management, A thorough review sounds like a wise move. Great, it might prove useful. James chuckled. I'll bring everything I need. See you at 10. Useful indeed. James would witness whatever Harry and Mary tried to do. And as a bank vice president, he'd understand exactly what he was seeing. More importantly, his presence would add legal weight to any record of their actions. Final call, Harry. I let my voice carry that same trembling uncertainty I'd practiced earlier that afternoon. Harry, I've been thinking about those papers you brought. You're right, I need help managing things. Dad, that's wonderful. Mary will be so relieved. We can come by first thing tomorrow. I've arranged for a notary to make sure everything is proper and legal. 10 sharp. Perfect. And Dad, thank you for trusting us with this. Trust. The word tasted bitter, but I worked to sound grateful. You're my family. Of course, I trust you. After I hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. Ellen's rose garden needed tending, another task I'd taken over since she passed. Tomorrow would decide whether I'd keep caring for it as a free man or watch it wither from the window of a nursing home while Harry and Mary divided up the work of my life. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote down the sequence of events I anticipated for tomorrow. 9:45 a.m. Catherine arrives, prepares for notarization. 10:12 a.m. James arrives with financial portfolio. 10:05 a.m. Harry and Mary arrive, expecting an easy signature. 10:00 a.m. Professional witnesses observe their manipulation. 10:15 a.m. Truth revealed, I did not miss the delicious irony. They had studied how to strip away my independence through legal procedures, but forgot that legal procedures require witnesses and documentation. Tomorrow, those same requirements would expose their betrayal. 20 miles away, Harry was probably explaining to Mary how cooperative I had been, how the notary would make everything official, and how they were close to securing control of millions. Tonight, they would celebrate, believing a confused old man had finally accepted their help. They didn't realize they were stepping into a trap set by the very professionals who built the systems they were trying to exploit. I looked at Alexa's crayon drawing still pinned to the fridge. A stick figure family next to a lopsided house. Tomorrow would decide whether she grew up with grandparents who protected her or parents who taught her that family loyalty could be bought and sold. Ellen's voice echoed from 3 years ago. Promise me you'll always take care of Alexa. I had meant to keep that promise. Monday morning was gray and cold. I slept little that night, but when Catherine arrived at 9:45 a.m. with her notary stamp and ledger, I felt completely ready. Good morning, Norman, she said, arranging the documents on the side table. This should be pretty straightforward. James knocked at exactly 10 o'clock, holding a bank folder. Morning, Norman. Ready to go over those numbers? More ready than you think, I replied, just as footsteps echoed toward the door. Harry and Mary entered with confident smiles and a leather folder in hand. They paused the moment they saw Catherine and James sitting quietly by the bookshelf, both professionally composed with folders in hand. For just a second, Mary's polished smile slipped, but she was quick, far too quick. She clasped her hands together with an air of graceful acceptance, her voice soft like velvet. Dad, how thoughtful of you to arrange professional support, she said sweetly, a little too sweetly. This will make everything feel so much more official. It was a clever pivot, just the kind of performance I'd expected from her. But today, I wasn't the tired old man she thought I was yesterday. Today, my voice was clear, steady, unapologetically sharp. The man they had underestimated was gone. Please, everyone, have a seat, I said, gesturing toward the chairs around my desk. Harry took the seat directly across from me, still wearing that smile, the one he'd practiced in the mirror since he was 10. But now it seemed tighter around the edges. Dad, you sound much better today, he said, chuckling nervously. Just like your old self. Exactly, just like the man who had once negotiated million-dollar deals across polished tables like this one. The man who could read a lie in the twitch of an eyebrow. The man they never thought they would have to face again. I leaned forward slowly, placing both hands flat on the desk. My gaze locked with Harry's, unflinching. That's why I need to tell you something before we sign anything. Mary's pen halted mid-stroke over her neatly prepared checklist, the silver tip hovering in midair. Norman, what's going on? She asked. Calm on the surface, but the edge in her voice gave her away. I looked at her, not unkindly, but without yielding. It's not about your mother, Mary. She's perfectly fine. But she was fully aware of your plan. You could hear the air shift in the room. Tension hung like a curtain pulled tight on him. Harry's smile cracked, just a little. His shoulders stiffened. The mask he'd worn so carefully throughout Alexa's party was beginning to splinter. Dad, what plan? We're just here to help you. There it was, the opening lie. I kept my voice even. I know about James' visit to the bank last Tuesday. My eyes shifted to James, whose stiff posture betrayed his discomfort. He blinked and said nothing. I know about the guardianship papers you have been researching. Mary's fingers tightened around her checklist, knuckles whitening. And I know about the cognitive assessments you hoped I'd agree to. The ones that would declare me incompetent. The ones that would give you access to everything I've built. The silence that followed was deep and unmistakable. The kind of silence that happens only when truth is laid bare in a room full of lies. Harry's face turned as pale as the pages in front of him. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Mary's mask cracked. Her carefully sculpted calm faltered for the briefest moment. She quickly drew in a breath, trying to recover her composure, pressing her lips into a tight, practiced smile. Norman, you're mistaken, she began, her tone syrupy and strained. We only went to the bank to discuss our own financial planning. That's all. I turned toward James, my voice cool and unwavering. James, could you please share what they discussed with you on Tuesday afternoon? James cleared his throat, slipping into the measured cadence of professionalism. They asked detailed questions about guardianship procedures, he began, including the steps to declare someone mentally incompetent, the required documentation, and how to file an emergency petition for full financial control of another adult. Across the desk, Catherine looked up from her notary ledger, her eyes narrowing with concern. Mr. Price, she asked carefully, are you telling us that these power of attorney documents were prepared under false pretenses? I nodded, slow and deliberate. What I'm saying, I said, meeting both of their eyes, is that my son and daughter-in-law have spent months planning to declare me mentally unfit, so they could steal everything I've worked for over the past 40 years. For a second, the only sound was the ticking of the clock behind me. Harry finally found his voice, though it was brittle. Dad, we were just worried about you. You've seemed confused, like yesterday at the party. I leaned forward. Yesterday, I said, my voice like steel, I was performing. Today, Harry, today you're meeting the real me. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a heavy folder. The paper inside slid onto the desk with a satisfying thud. 247 transactions, over 3 years, $70,000 in quiet support, every single mortgage payment, every car repair, every private school tuition receipt. Mary leaned forward now, her voice rising, shaded with panic beneath her poise. Those were legitimate family expenses, Norman. Conditional support. You agreed. I locked eyes with her. You trained me, I said, my voice low but cutting, to say yes to bigger and bigger amounts. Until finally you thought I'd say yes to giving up my autonomy entirely. You didn't just want help, Mary. You wanted control, and you researched exactly how to put me in a care home. Well, you divided up my estate like it was already yours. Catherine placed her pen down with slow precision. This is highly irregular, she said, her voice professional but cool. I won't notarize anything until I have complete clarity and legal review. I continued, my voice now unwavering, each word chosen like a scalpel meant to expose the truth. The truth is harsh but simple. My son and daughter-in-law have spent weeks, maybe months, quietly preparing a legal ambush. They researched guardianship procedures in detail, consulted attorneys in secret, and devised a strategy to legally declare me mentally incompetent. Not because I showed signs of decline, but because they hoped I would. Harry's hand trembled as he clung to the armrest like it was the last solid thing in the room. We never meant to hurt you, Dad. We just thought maybe you needed help handling everything. Help? I echoed, my tone cool and measured. Help with managing a $2.3 million net worth? 3 rental properties? You think that kind of help justifies researching emergency court filings behind my back? Mary stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. This isn't fair. You're twisting everything. We love you. I looked at her for a long, steady moment. Mary, love isn't a strategy. Love doesn't creep behind closed doors drafting legal declarations of incompetence. Love doesn't position itself to inherit while the living are still breathing and lucid. That's not love. That's ambition disguised in the clothes of concern. James spoke next, his voice quiet but razor sharp. Norman's right. The questions they asked me weren't casual. They were precise. They knew terms and processes most people never encounter, unless they're actively planning something manipulative. Catherine, ever the professional, now looked up from her journal with a rare seriousness. I've notarized documents for 2 decades, she said slowly. Families planning for a loved one's future never start by researching how to declare them unfit. That's not planning, it's positioning. The room went silent. Harry's breathing became shallow, uneven. He looked at me with something new in his eyes, recognition or perhaps shame. For the first time, he saw not just his aging father, but the man who had built something from nothing, the man he had underestimated. So what happens now? He whispered. I stood there, feeling every year of my age settle into my bones, not with frailty, but with clarity. And I felt too, inch by inch, moment by moment, heartbreak by heartbreak, the steady weight of what it means to be betrayed by your own blood. Not all at once, but bit by bit by bit by bit. Trust doesn't shatter in a single moment. It crumbles quietly, until one day all that's left is dust and the silence that follows it. Now, I said slowly, deliberately, let's talk about consequences. Consequences, Harry repeated, his voice dry, incredulous. I opened the desk drawer and removed the legal documents I had spent the weekend drafting. Each page a response, not of anger, but of resolve. Yes, consequences. I placed the thick folder on the table with a firmness that made Mary flinch. I will be amending my will immediately. My estate, all of it, the properties, the investments, the savings, will be transferred into an irrevocable education trust for Alexa. Harry leaned forward, desperate now. Dad, please. We made mistakes. We know that, but we can fix this. Don't do something we can't undo. I looked at him, but my gaze went further, through him perhaps, to the little girl who had drawn a crooked house and a stick-figure family, hoping the world she lived in would be kind and safe. The trust, I continued, will fund her college education, graduate school if she chooses, and seed capital for whatever life she decides to build. No one will control it but her, and not until she's 21. It will be her future, untouched by your ambition. I unfolded the new will, setting it flat on the desk, and turned to Catherine. I need this witnessed and notarized today. Mary's voice cracked. Norman, you can't do this to your own family. I turned to her, and this time there was steel in my voice, but also something sorrowful, the grief of having to choose between love and survival. I am protecting my family, I said, from parents who were prepared to steal their daughter's inheritance by institutionalizing her grandfather for their own comfort. Catherine, always composed, reviewed the documents with practiced eyes. Her brow furrowed slightly. Mr. Price, she said professionally, these provisions are highly detailed. Specific conditions are attached to every clause. I nodded. That's right. I had time to think, to prepare, and above all, I looked at Harry and Mary, both stunned into silence now. To act before it was too late. If Harry and Mary formally renounce all claims to my estate, I said slowly, letting each word drop with finality, and if, over the next year, they demonstrate real, lasting change, then, and only then, I will reconsider. I turned toward them, not to the faces of my son and daughter-in-law, but to something deeper, the fragile outline of Alexa's future, suspended in uncertainty. But they'll have to earn that reconsideration, I added, my voice firm, unwavering. By becoming the kind of parents Alexa deserves, not the kind who treat family as a transaction or love as leverage. James, quiet but resolute, nodded as he witnessed my signature. A single pen stroke that didn't just sign a document, it carved a new boundary into the bedrock of our lives. The educational trust is a beautiful structure, James said softly, admiration in his tone. She'll have chances we never had. A real future, earned through protection, not manipulation. Harry sank into the chair like a man unraveling. His voice, muffled behind shaking hands, was laced with hollow disbelief. What does real change even look like? How are we supposed to prove something like that to you? I didn't pause. By getting real jobs that can support your family, not by draining the retirement I spent 40 years building. By putting Alexa's joy and growth ahead of your own comfort. By showing me, not with words, but with consistent, visible choices, that she matters more to you than my net worth ever did. Mary stood up so fast her chair screeched. The polished facade she'd worn like armor all week cracked wide open. Her voice trembled, raw and unfiltered. How are we supposed to live without your support? I met her eyes, not with bitterness, but something sharper. Clarity. The same way millions of families do, with integrity, with effort, with choices that reflect maturity, not entitlement. Then I said the words they never expected to hear, and yet the ones they had been earning for years. The mortgage assistance ends today. Car payments stop now. You are both educated, capable adults. Figure it out. Catherine, composed as ever, placed the final seal of notarization with practiced grace. She collected the signed documents and stood. Everything is now legally binding, she confirmed. I recommend keeping these in a secured location. My attorney will have them by this afternoon, I replied. With calm farewells and quiet promises of confidentiality, Catherine and James slipped out, leaving only the three of us in the room. A room that had once held trust, now filled only with consequence. We sat in silence, the air thick with realization. Harry looked like a man stripped of his illusions, finally seeing that borrowed ambition leads to nothing but emptiness. Mary's eyes darted, not with guilt, but calculation. She was already thinking of the next angle, the next manipulation. In me, I felt something I hadn't in years. Certainty. For the first time, I had drawn a line they could not cross. And this time, they were the ones standing on the outside of it. Is there anything else you want to say? I asked. Harry met my gaze, really met it, for the first time since the veil had been lifted. There was no performance in his eyes now, no calculation. Just a boy, my boy, drowning in regret. I'm sorry, Dad. His voice was soft, raw, the way a man speaks when there's nothing left to hide behind. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I mean it. I really am sorry. Mary said nothing, and in that silence, I heard all I needed to know about her priorities. Words are easy, Harry, I replied, my tone neither cold nor cruel. Just true. It's what you do in the next year that will decide the future of this family. 3 hours later, a soft knock echoed through the quiet of my study, not sharp or hurried, but gentle. The kind of knock that asked for permission, not out of fear, but out of respect. When I opened the door, Alexa stood there, framed in the dim glow of the hallway, her backpack still resting on her tiny shoulders like a shield too heavy for her age. Her voice, as always, was soft, but today it held something else too, a quiet seriousness. Grandpa? She asked. Grandma said you wanted to see me. I felt my chest tighten, not from pain, but from the overwhelming tenderness that filled me every time I looked at her. The weight of everything we'd just been through fell away in that moment, like dust shaken from old coats. I dropped to one knee, bringing myself down to her level, just as I had in that sterile hospital hallway 2 days ago. That day I'd met her eyes with grief. Today I met them with purpose. I reached for her hand. Come sit with me, sweetheart, I said, voice gentle. We need to have a little grown-up talk. She followed me into the room and curled up beside me on the sofa, her small hands neatly folded in her lap. The way she held herself, composed, curious, waiting, reminded me how children often carry more clarity than the adults around them. Alexa was only 8, but there was a knowing in her eyes that no textbook could teach. The quiet intelligence of someone who noticed things, especially the things grown-ups tried to keep hidden. She glanced at me, cautious. "Is this about what Mommy said to me?" she asked. "Partly," I nodded. I took a breath, steadying my words so they wouldn't carry anger. "Only truth. Your parents, they've made some poor decisions, especially when it comes to money. And yes, there are consequences for that." I paused to meet her gaze. "But listen to me, Alexa. Not one of those mistakes, not even the worst of them, changes how much your mother loves you. That love is real, and it's deep. But even deep love doesn't always stop people from doing the wrong thing. Grown-ups can be foolish too." Her little forehead creased, brows furrowed, the exact expression Ellen used to wear when a crossword clue stumped her. A tiny echo of her grandmother sitting here beside me. "Are they in trouble?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded gently. "They're not being punished, Alexa," I said, "but they do have a lot to learn about how to take care of themselves, about how to take care of you too, better than they have." I let the words breathe for a moment before continuing, softening my tone. "But here's what I want you to remember, no matter what happens." I turned to her fully, placing my hand over hers. "You don't have to be afraid. Your future is safe, completely. I've made sure of it. You'll be able to go to any university you want, and you can study anything that makes your heart light up." Her eyes lit up, that magical flicker of possibility, the spark of dreams not yet defined. A spark I had feared this ordeal might have dulled. "Even vet school?" she whispered, almost afraid to hope. "It's really expensive." I smiled then, a true rooted smile, not of pride or victory, but of love. The kind of smile Ellen Buck used to coax from me just by entering the room. "Especially vet school," I said. "And if you decide later on that you want to become an engineer, a teacher, an artist, or even open your own bakery, there will still be money. The path is yours now, Alexa, and you get to choose where it leads." She looked up at me, but this time the curiosity in her eyes was laced with something deeper. Hope, the fragile, beautiful kind that grows best in safe places. Then she asked the question I'd been bracing for, the one that still, even now, managed to make my heart ache. "What about Mommy and Daddy?" I squeezed her hand gently. "They're going to try, sweetheart," I said. "They're going to work very hard to become the kind of parents you deserve, to earn back the trust they lost." I paused. "And if they truly change, if they show not just me, but you, that they've become better, then maybe, just maybe, this family can find its way back together." I brushed a strand of hair away from her cheek, the way Ellen used to do for both of us. "But even if that takes time, even if things don't go as we hope, you will always have me, Alexa, and you will always have your grandma, not just in spirit, but in the way she lives on inside you, and in the parts of me she left behind." Without hesitation, Alexa wrapped her arms around me. It was small, delicate, but the weight of it could have held the entire world. And in that embrace, I felt Ellen again. Not as memory, but as presence. Not as sorrow, but as legacy. 3 generations of love, still reaching, still holding on, even through betrayal, even through broken trust. Alexa pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Can we look at college flyers now?" she asked. "I want to see what vet schools look like." I reached for my laptop, the smile still lingering on my lips. "Absolutely," I said. "We've got all the time in the world to plan your future." Outside, the light had changed. That tender shift where spring quietly hands its baton to summer. And out in the garden beneath the window, Ellen's roses, the ones she planted with her bare hands, had finally beautifully begun to bloom. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to give it a like. Your support helps us keep sharing powerful stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Norman's place? Leave your opinion in the comments below. Your voice matters, and if you enjoy emotional, thought-provoking stories about life, family, and the choices that shape us, subscribe to Daily Stories and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care and stay kind.